What is going on, Tentacrew? My name is Billy the Squid, and you know a game has promise when the game developers actually put some effort and some panache into their title screen music. And that wraps up Thymesia perfectly, a game of promise. Will it live up to the promise on its August release? The demo is out, and we have a lot of hands-on time with it, so let's talk about it. Thymesia is the newest game from Team 17 with a huge gaming catalog. Going back to the Worms franchise, they also have Golf with Friends, My Time in Portia, Blasphemous, Overcooked, and the infamous Yooka-Laylee. Team 17's been busy, and this is their first foray into the Souls-like genre. A genre that is starting to compete with the Battle Royale genre for oversaturation of games. The problem with the Souls-like genre is a lot of soulless, pun intended, clones being put out there that just copy-paste the Souls formula without actually adding anything different, new, and exciting to that formula. Looking at you, Hellpoint. There are plenty of gems amongst the trash of this genre. Mortal Shell comes to mind as a game that took the Souls formula and transformed it into something new and exciting and its own. And that is something Thymesia is going to need to do to be able to stand out in this growing genre. But that's enough talking about other games. Let's talk about the Thymesia demo itself. At first glance, Thymesia is just Bloodborne meets Tim Burton. People love Plague Doctors. You know what else people love? Ninjas. Roll those both together and you actually have a pretty decent protagonist. In a world that is slowly being overrun by a deadly plague, the kingdom has went Full Metal Alchemist style and used the laws of transmutation to turn the plague into the cure. But things may not be what they seem as the plague slowly starts to leak into the kingdom. A fairly standard plot for these style of games that definitely has echoes of a Bloodborne-inspired plotline. I'm okay with it. I'm sure the writing isn't going to be anything groundbreaking, and to be honest with you, these games have never really been about the writing as much as they have been the action and the moment-to-moment combat. And I know some of you will argue with me down in the comments below that story is everything with these games, especially in the From Software games, and to what I will argue is yes, it is very good if you take the effort and look into it, but how many people do you think are genuinely looking into the Souls lore? They just want to play hard games and fight hard bosses. Our main character of the game is Corvus, a plague doctor wrapped in raven black garbs with a few bird-based abilities that are appropriate of his namesake. Design-wise, I like Corvus. If you're not going to have a character customization screen in your game, then you need your main character to, one, not be overly distracting and gaudy and cringe and all that stuff, but you also need them to look cool enough so that the player actively feels good playing as that person. And I think they did that fine here. The demo starts you off in the back streets of a plague-decimated town on the outskirts of the kingdom, and it becomes clear very quickly that while this game might look a little bit Bloodborne, it is Sekiro through and through. The first major thing of note is that Corvus is only going to have access to the saber and dagger as your primary attacking tool throughout the course of Thymesia. While people might not like this because it doesn't have as much build variety, you are going to have side tools similar to prosthetic tools in the game, on top of the other quirks and caveats that Thymesia has in store for the player. This is going to be a very finesse-driven game, and while that will prove very rewarding for players that stick through that learning curve, it could also be a detriment to the game overall and put a lot of people off right out of the gate. Before we get into the combat systems, it is important to talk about the health system of the enemies, because that is one of the biggest differentiators of Thymesia from other games in this genre. The health is split into two groups, a blue bar or a wounds bar, and a red bar, which is their true health bar. Attacking with your saber will inflict wounds on the enemies, decreasing the blue bar. Once the blue bar is all the way down, you will start inflicting damage onto the red bar. It is also important to note that each saber attack will do a little, very, very small, minute, almost insignificant amount of damage to the red bar. But like I said, once you get the blue bar all the way down, all the damage will go straight to the red bar. Once the red bar is all the way down, you'll be able to execute an enemy. If an enemy is left unattended for too long, the blue bar will heal back up to wherever the red bar is at. So decreasing red bar will decrease the amount that the enemy is able to heal back in blue. Corvus has a standard 3-hit combo with his saber. He also has a single dash move that is able to dodge one attack or one pairing of attacks that are in quick succession. The iframes are very pinpoint. You need to use this almost like a parry and dodge right at the instance the attack is about to hit you to get the most oomph out of it, or you'll most likely be hit. And speaking of parries, Corvus has a parry. Any attack in this game can be parried with a few notable exceptions that I will get to later. And to finish off basic abilities, Corvus has a claw swipe. This is a big gap closer that will attack red bar directly, at least any red bar that is exposed. So the kind of ebb and flow to this game is you want to go in and attack with the saber to decrease the blue bar and expose some of the red bar, back off, and then find an opening to claw swipe to attack the red bar directly. The swipe allows you to attack the red bar without the blue bar having to get all the way down. This attack has quite a bit of windup, and while you are in this attack, you cannot cancel out of it in any way, shape, or form, so you need to be very deliberate on when you go in for a claw swipe, or you might end up taking damage in the process. The claw swipe, just like power attacks in the Souls series, you can charge it up and unleash a charged claw swipe. This is going to be a much shorter range attack, but if it connects with an enemy, you are most likely going to be able to steal an ability from that enemy. The demo had a few different variations of these stealed attacks, whether it be an axe slam, a big spear thrust, or a great sword swipe and slam. Unfortunately, at least in the case for the demo, I did not use the charged claw attack very often, or the abilities that came with it. This is because the risk and reward that comes from using this style of attack just isn't there in the demo. Enemies have hyper armor whenever they're in the middle of an attack animation, and this starts at the beginning of the windup of their attack animation. So if you're sitting there charging an R2, they could instantly go into an attack animation, and since there's no way of canceling out, you're going to have to eat that attack directly. This makes the risk of even acquiring one of these abilities a little bit too high, as it does take quite a long time for you to charge up this charged claw swipe. On top of this, while you are activating one of these abilities, you do not get any hyper armor, and the enemies still maintain their hyper armor through whatever attack they are doing. So you can use it during an opening when you know an enemy isn't going to be doing anything, but if they start up an attack animation right before your attack lands, they are still going to follow through with that attack animation. You might end up getting hit in the recovery frames of using that ability. I was really hoping that these abilities would have some form of additional stagger to them, since it is so difficult to get them and you need to time out when you can use them. But in the case of the demo, that is not how it's going to be, and I hope that this is something that they do look into and change for the August release. Last thing of note is the damage didn't seem that worth it overall either from these abilities. While we weren't able to access them in the demo, it does look like we will have a slot for either throwables, consumables, or permanent plague-based abilities. We're not sure what's going to go in that slot, but hopefully it will add another little nuance to the combat systems. As far as enemies go, the demo is very short and there are only a few different variants of enemy, but it does give you a good taste of what to expect from the finalized product of the game. You start off in these back alleys fighting a few people with daggers and hatchets. The dagger enemies you are able to R1 span into oblivion. They will not be able to break out of that. The hatchet enemies, however, will break out of your stun lock in 2 to 3 swings. And this probably brings up the importance, more so than any other Souls-like, that you do not want to be an R1 spamming machine. Each R1 press must be very deliberate. You need to focus on the enemy and see, oh, did they recoil from that previous R1? Am I safe to go into another? If they recoiled, go for another. If they didn't recoil, you need to go on the defensive and be ready to either parry or dodge out of the way, because that hyper armor will prevent you from doing any more stagger to them, and you'll most likely eat an attack if you try to go for another R1. The first elite style enemy you come up with is a dude with a hatchet and the wooden shield from Bloodborne. Boy, was that thing useless in that game. It's actually not too bad for him here. This adds a few new caveats to the combat system, where if you are sabering into his shield, he can potentially parry you and then counterattack off of that. Whenever you get parried, you do get a little bit of a stagger to your character, and while you are able to react to the enemy's attack and you can dodge them 100% of the time, these attacks come out very quickly, and I don't know if my reaction time is just bad, but I had a lot of trouble recovering if I got parried in any way. If you're attacking into his flesh, though, he's just a standard hatchet-based enemy. 2 to 3 hits will break his stagger and he'll go into an attack animation. You counter, the dance continues. Last thing of note is you can steal his hatchet ability, and the slam will go through his shield, so this is kind of a guard break style move, and one of the best uses that I saw from the plague abilities out of the demo. But once you beat him, it's over with the trash mobs and nothing but elites moving forward. The first elite that you're going to run into is a knight with a greatsword, and this introduces the mechanic of the unblockable attack. Anytime an enemy flashes, that means the next attack that they are going to do is going to be an unblockable, so you will not be able to parry it. So your actions that you can do is either dodge out of the way with it with your dodge step, or a new mechanic, the Feather Toss. The Feather Toss is an interesting move on paper, but I don't feel like it's executed super well in the confines of this game, at least in its current state. What it does is allows you to basically pocket sand somebody that is doing one of these unbreakable attacks. In the case of the Greatsword Knight, I assumed it was only going to be used for gap closer attacks, since that seemed to be the only time that he used his unblockable attack was during a thrust or gap closer. In which case, the ranged Feather Toss makes a lot of sense. You have a ranged ability to interrupt that gap closer, kind of similar to a Makiri counter in Sekiro, and it felt really good in those instances. There were instances, though, where he would use this attack at point-blank range. I don't know if the game was assuming that you were going to dodge backwards away from the first attack, and then he was going to try to gap close onto you with the unbreakable attack, but trying to use the Feather Toss at point-blank felt extremely awkward. This is a projectile with travel speed, and while at a distance, when somebody is gap closing onto you, having that projectile moving forward, the timing felt better. Whenever you are trying to use this at point blank, since you can only use it in the middle of that person's attack animation, it felt like it was very, very awkward, and I'm not going to say impossible, but the timings didn't feel as good as what it did when it was in gap closer form. And the timings are something that I want to bring up in general, because in the form of Sekiro, whenever you had a Makiri counter or a Goomba Stomp, there would be the flash of the symbol to show that one of these attacks is coming out, and then with a certain cadence that was unanimous for most of the enemies in the game, you would have your reaction time. Flash, do your reaction. Flash, do your reaction. With this game, there's not that much of a cadence. It seems like it's based on enemy to enemy, and while that's fine, coming from a more dance-like system with the power attacks in Sekiro, this one felt a little bit more awkward. But again, if it's on an individual enemy basis, you just need to learn those enemies, so it will get better as you fight these guys. All in all, though, I had a really good time fighting the Greatsword Knight. All of the attacks he does are easily telegraphed. You can see based on his stance which attack he is going to do next. There's only a few attacks that seem to come out pretty quickly, but they were so rare that I just didn't have a chance to learn them, so I'm chalking that up to just my lack of knowledge. And if I observed him a little bit more, I would probably be able to figure out the proper dodge or parry times on those attacks as well. Very well done fight, very enjoyable fight, and it had that nice ebb and flow dance style to it. The same could not be said of the Spear Knight, which is the last elite that you will fight right before the final boss of the demo. When the Greatsword Knight felt like a really nice dance and felt very good and fun to fight, this enemy was nothing but frustrating, at least for me, and I'm going to break down why. You know how some people are complaining that Elden Ring bosses are very RNG dependent? Well, that seems to be all this specific enemy is to the nth degree. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it did feel like there were little to no attack opportunities with this enemy, especially considering that if you do get a good stagger on him, he can parry you at any point in your combo. Again, bringing it back to a Sekiro comparison, enemies in that game always had a set place in your combo in the back and forth that you were going with them, where your attack would get broken or they would parry you. It was very predictable, it was rhythmic, it made sense. This has a full RNG parry system from what I can tell at the very least, and it could be the very first attack that you go, or it could be the last attack in your 3-hit combo, or he could let you go an entire 3-hit combo without interrupting you at all. It really is dependent on what the enemy wanted to do. This combined with the ability of him being able to go into an attack string at any point in your combo, it just felt really odd, and it felt like you were getting punished for trying to play offensively or play on the attack at all. Perhaps this is an enemy where they really wanted you to focus more so on parrying than attacking, and if that's the case, I feel could have been done in a lot better of a way. If they wanted you to parry this enemy exclusively, they should have made it so that anytime you went in for a saber attack, he would immediately deflect you and then go into his own attack string. That way, it forced you to learn, hey, this game is going to be heavily parry-based. We're going to put this enemy here to test your parry ability before you go into the boss. This enemy also had two different forms of the unblockable attacks. One was a gap close, which is easy enough to feather toss, as I said with the Greatsword Knight, but the other one comes after a parry, and it doesn't even come directly after the parry. He will parry you to a double spin, which will put you into a stunned hit animation, and then do an unblockable slam. So unless you double parry the spin that comes off of him deflecting your attack, and then immediately Feather Toss, you are going to take all 3 hits of damage, and this combo does almost an entire health bar worth of damage. If it didn't kill you, you are very, very close to dying. Another one of the deflects that he does is a deflect, and then he'll backstep and lunge out at you, which I never got the timing of either. Again, these could all just be growing pains and me not being 100% with the game's mechanics, but this enemy in particular had a lot of RNG to it that I wasn't the biggest fan of, and I'm hoping that this is the exception, not the norm, for enemy design moving forward in Thymesia. Because once we got to the final boss, it was really, really fun. Varg is a very, very good tutorial boss for the demo, and other than him not having any unblockable attacks for you to Feather Toss, he is a very good skill test for the player. While his design might not be the most impressive thing, just being another Guts clone as Soulsborne games love to do, his fight and his moveset are at least a lot of fun to fight. He has 2 different jumps and a dash for gap closing abilities to keep you on your toes. He also has several different attack strings that he can interchange with each other or swap attack chain in the middle of those. All is done very well to keep the player focused on the enemy, reading what the enemy is doing, and reacting appropriately. I only had a few minor gripes with the Varg boss fight. One, there was no unbreakable attacks for you to use Feather Toss on. I felt like this was weird considering that they had it on most of the enemies throughout the game, but not for the main boss of the demo. I understand that he is going to be in the final game a multi-tier boss, and most likely in those advanced tiers he will get more and more unblockable attacks. But it just felt weird that there wasn't even a single one in this demo. 2, you can steal an ability from him, but with his attack patterns and stuff, it is very hard for you to be able to get the time to charge up a claw and steal the ability, and it's even harder for you to be able to execute this ability. This ability has a very long animation time, it has a very long windup, it has a very long recovery time. I was only able to successfully use this ability once after one of his very specific jump attacks, and I had to use it immediately after. If I'd used it any time later, I would have gotten a hit because I basically had to dodge or parry immediately after using this ability. It just does not have enough usability in its current form. Now, if this ability would have staggered him, I would have been going for them a significant amount more, but in its current state, I was disappointed by that. And lastly, anytime he killed you, it would bring you through the death animation that goes through, bring up the thank you for playing Thymesia screen, and then put you back to the title screen where you had to continue back in and then go into the fight from there. Luckily, when you continued back in, it started you right outside of the boss door, so you only had to walk like 5 feet to get in there, but it just felt like an oversight of the demo. As I said at the start of the video, Thymesia is the game of promise. There are a lot of really good things in this game. I feel like the parry system is very tight and controlled, and you need to be deliberate both in your dodges, your attacks, and your parries. I think all of this leads to a very fun and rhythmic experience that has a very high learning curve, but the fun in learning that is there. I think they could expand the parry windows just a little bit. I think they are almost to the perfect point, but might just be a little bit too difficult for people to really get the feel for. The ebb and flow of combat is there, and I really like the going in with the saber and then trying to find an opening to use your claw attacks to kind of whittle down that red bar as you are fighting an enemy. I do enjoy the health system in this game with the blue bar to red bar back and forth ratio, and I like that parrying will decrease the blue bar just as if you were hitting with your saber. It gives more reward for you getting these successful parries, especially since that is a central point of the game. I think if they add a few quality of life changes to the claw, where you can be able to dash roll out of the claw animation in case you hit the claw and the enemy immediately goes into an attack, since that hyper armor is there, having the ability to cancel out of that would be very nice, so that you're not just eating damage for free, especially on the charged claw when you're trying to steal abilities. This would make the risk reward for trying to get charged abilities a little bit less, and also make it so that the abilities have an advanced stagger on enemies. If those abilities broke hyper armor, I would have used them significantly more than what I did in the demo. It just felt like there was too much risk, and especially with Varg, not having the ability to use his swing and slam was very disappointing to me. Thymesia's release date is August 9th, so I have a lot of confidence that they are able to polish this game up before that release date. We also don't know what version this demo is on, so this could be on a much earlier version of the build than what they have currently in their grasp. Regardless, what do you all think of Thymesia? Is this a game that you are going to be picking up in the future? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you want to try out the demo yourself, I will have a link to the demo down below. It is available on Steam. If you enjoyed this video or enjoy Souls-like content in general, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We are going to be doing a lot more of this stuff in the future. And until next time, Tentacruel, much love. Bye-bye.